Welcome to QX Church. Find us online at qxchurch.org. I'm Pastor Scott Conway, and we are talking about connecting with God. In the last lesson, we talked about the 750 different ways the Bible references God. Commonly, I'll say 400 because of the amount of overlap. Even if the number were 100, if you cluster them together by theme, there's still an incredible and effectively infinite number of ways to come before God. Because any of the 750 is a proper way. Any combination of the 750 is a proper way. And as we explored a little bit of the math last time, as you start to total up all the possible combinations, every living human being could change the exact way they approach God every single second of every single day, from now until the heat death of the universe, according to conventional scientific thinking, and not exhaust all possible combinations. And just as a reminder, using a small number as an example, if there's over 100, and say we're going to cluster them at 100, but we'll keep it at about 100, there's 100 ways to do one of 100. There's 100 times 99 ways to do any combination of 2. We'll just keep the number 100 so that we can see the example of the math. And so there'll be 100 times 100. That's 10,000 different ways. And then if you add another 100, now you're up to 1 million different ways, and so on and so on. And so the numbers get very, very big, very, very fast. Now we're going to start with some pretty interesting, cool stuff about why God would give us so many ways to connect with Him. And wrap up with what, at least to me, is a staggering truth. One big reason, of course, is that there's an easy way for everyone. One or more ways will resonate with someone more than others. And there's a lot of factors that play into that, about why God would give us so many ways to do this. Whichever of the right ways, whichever of the 750, whether it's all of them, whether it's one of them, whether it's any 3 or 4 or 5 of them, whether it's any 15 or 20 of them, resonate most with you. So long as they're from the list, so long as they're reasonable interpretations of what's on the list, if it's most meaningful to you, if it's easiest for you, use that one. Use those. Use that combination. Just like we do in human relationships. Start or grow your relationship where it means the most to you. With so many ways the Bible refers to God, one of them will be best for your circumstances. One of them will be best for your life season. One of them will be best for you as an individual. One of them will be best for your culture. One of them will be best for your age, meaning the age of man. We're going to dive into each one of these in a little bit more detail. But it is pretty amazing, though, how similar this is to human relationships. Because there are people, in my particular case, I have a lot of different roles, and someone may connect with me as a martial arts master. Someone may connect with me as their kid's karate teacher. Someone may connect with me as a counselor. Someone may connect with me as a teacher. Someone may connect with me as a lawyer. Someone may connect with me as a real estate broker. Someone may connect with me just as a man. Someone may connect with me as a man with my kind of experience. Someone may connect with me from my political views or my way of thinking. Someone may connect with me in any number of ways that's true for me. So it's just an aspect of who I really am. So it's true, but it's only one part of who I am. And that might be a place that a relationship begins. Sometimes if it's just going to be a business relationship, the only places we connect might be the places that are relevant to the business. If it's going to be a co-worker relationship, the only places we connect might be places that are relevant or at least not contradicting our co-worker relationship, and so on and so on. So this isn't just talking about romance. This is talking about every human relationship, every human connection. So some way of connecting to God will be best for your circumstances. Circumstances change sometimes from moment to moment, from day to day, year to year. Sometimes we need a merciful God. Sometimes we've messed up, and we know we deserve punishment. And in these moments, if we understand that God is a merciful God, God loves us and gives us mercy. What mercy means is that there is punishment that we deserve. and God is not going to impose that punishment. Sometimes we need a merciful God so that we know when we've done wrong, we can run to him instead of have to run from him. Sometimes we need a sure foundation. That sometimes life is chaos. Sometimes it's just the nature of life. Is a certain percentage of life is just chaos. Sometimes stuff is happening. People are sick, or there's been an accident, or there's been a massive reversal of some sort. And in the midst of chaos, sometimes what we need is a sure foundation. Sometimes what we need is our rock, our fortress, our shield. Sometimes we need he that is able to keep you from falling, which is another way that the Bible refers to God. That sometimes we know that we're facing a difficult time. We're facing serious temptation. We're having to grapple with hard decisions. Sometimes what we realize we're doing is we're facing a choice between wrong and wronger. And that we're having to figure out, well, what are we going to do? Just as an example of that one, imagine for a moment that you're a parent. And also imagine for a moment that you're trying to provide for your family, but you've gotten put in a situation where you're being asked to do something that you think is a little unethical, and your straight ethics in and of themselves, just for yourself, there's no way you would do that. But you realize if you don't do that, you're going to lose your job. And you don't see a way out. And so you're struggling with this because on one hand, you have your ethical values, and then on the other hand, you have the value of being able to financially take care of your family. And you feel like one way or another you're going to fall and you don't know what to do. And in moments like that, sometimes what you need is a God who's able to keep you from falling. A God who will help open up for you ways of things. Say, there's got to be a way to do this without falling. Now, sometimes it can be as simple a thing as you end up finding another job. And this happened to a man that I personally know, where he was asked to do something in the accounting division that he didn't approve of. He refused to do it. He was worried that if he didn't, he would be fired, which was okay with him. He quit and got another job. But he lined up his other job first. He made sure that his stock options, because he had stock options, had vested, so he could take care of his family financially to bridge the difference, and then he got another job. And when they asked, why did you leave the last job, he was perfectly honest with them, as they asked me to do something that I believed to be unethical, that they had a valid reason for asking me to do it, but it violates my ethics. And so if you want someone who's going to do that, I'm not the person for you. If you want someone who's going to stand up for the ethical way of doing things, even if the law will allow us to tweak it a bit, well, then I'm your man. And that's what someone was looking for. So they knew they were going to get honest numbers out of him. And he got another job. And he had the money to bridge between. So sometimes we need he that is able to keep you from falling. Sometimes we need the Lord our healer. Now, sometimes we're thinking of healing in the terms of physical healing. Now, I'll be perfectly honest with you. I have had very limited experience with seeing actual physical healing occur from healing prayer. I'll be completely honest with you about that. But very often what we need is God our healer in a psychological or spiritual sense. That we're hurt, we're wounded. Someone's done something to us that has caused damage to us. And that we have a wounded heart, we have a damaged spirit, and we need the Lord our healer to restore us. And then even with the physical, remember I said I have limited experience with that. That doesn't mean no experience. I have seen some healings. Now I will also confess that it is possible, it is within the bounds of the placebo effect. But the interesting thing about the placebo effect is it is an effect. It actually works, regardless of why it works. If you pray for someone and they get better and says, well, that could just be the placebo effect. I don't care why they're better. I just care that they're better. And if you believe in Genesis 1:1 that in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth, the placebo effect works because God made it that way. So I'm perfectly okay with that. Sometimes we need he who crowns us with loving kindness. Sometimes we're at the receiving end of a lot of harshness. Sometimes we feel harshness, bitterness, anger stirring up inside of us because of life circumstances. And what we need is He who crowns us with loving kindness. He who gives us the ability to rule over our circumstances from a loving perspective, from a kind perspective. And to be able to be kind to those who are unkind to us. To be able to take all these circumstances that have us in this pressure cooker and not take it out on our wives, our husbands, our children, our friends, our co-workers, our clients, our bosses. As life circumstances ebb and flow, as we go through high times and low times, as we go through easy times and hard times, times of great joy and times of great sorrow, sometimes we just need God differently. Sometimes we need God to show up in our lives in maybe a role that isn't our usual way of connecting with Him. But right here, right now, in this circumstance, this is what I need from God. And that what I need from God exists in that 750. What I need from God exists in some combination of 2 or 3 or 5 of them. And maybe that's not the way I normally connect with God. Maybe that's not normally how I really need to relate to God. But in these circumstances, with what's going on, with what I'm feeling, with what I'm going through, that's what I need right now. And if it's anywhere on that list, that is a perfectly appropriate, proper, and powerful way to connect to God. God always shows up with who God is, and He is everything. He is an infinite God, but the sliver of God that we need in any given moment, that particular, singular bit of truth that strengthens us, that inspires us, that fills us with courage, so that we can dive into that scary thing with some confidence that we can come out the other side stronger. Might vary a bit from moment to moment, from instant to instant, shifting as our circumstances shift. For all of it, God is there, ready to show up for us in whatever way we need from among the 750. The 750 truths of God expressed in Scripture. Sometimes we need God differently. We connect with God differently as our life season changes. Now, the biggest difference between a life season and the circumstances is mainly one of persistence. So a circumstance is something that's going on right now. A life season is a circumstance that's going to stick around for a while. Sometimes it's just a shift in circumstances. For instance, a simpler thing is when you're single and now you're married. Well, married is a different life season than single. It's a circumstance, but it's a circumstance that's going to last for a while. Being married without children is one life season. Being married with a child is a different life season. And then when you go to multiple children, when you get to 3 and now the kids outnumber the grown-ups in the house. These are different life seasons. Being the parent of a baby is different than being the parent of school-age children. It's different than being the parent of adult children. All these are seasons of life. So as the seasons of life change, much as when circumstances change, we may need God differently. We may need different blessings from His Word. We may need ideals to which to aspire, or comfort and strength in difficult seasons. That while we're parenting, we may come to Scripture and looking for the verses, the passages, the ideals that will help us take care of our children. When we're single, we may not need those. And as we've explored in our parenting and self-leadership, we may be able to derive other ideas and other principles out of that, but we don't go to God's Word saying, Lord, help me parent my children. That's a life season issue. If you don't have children to parent, you won't go to God's Word looking for that. And so as the life season changes, what you're looking for, what you need, what you hunger for, the problems you're trying to solve, the difficulties you're trying to overcome, the particular inspiration you need will shift. We may experience God one way as children and a slightly different way when we're teenagers. That when we're little, we might see God very much as we see our parents, particularly maybe our father. Every time we say, our Father who art in heaven, we might be thinking about our daddy. and thinking about daddy having supreme power. Sometimes that's a good thing, sometimes not so much. We may experience God differently as teens than we do as adults, as singles than we do married, or in a committed relationship and not yet married. In a committed relationship not yet married as to being parents, grandparents, and more. We may experience God as we're in our primary education years, our college years, our early career years, during career reversals, career advancements, as we approach retirement, or as we actually retire. We may connect with God differently as we are in different seasons of our lives. We may experience God living by the support of others, like when we're kids and growing up and mom and dad are paying all the bills. And very often the ideals that we can come to God with, the level of godly living that we can have when we're not faced with some of the harsher realities of day-to-day life, is different than we can when now we're kind of getting out there. And we're finding that we're being faced with ideas that maybe we hadn't really had to confront before. And the way we relate to God may shift in that time. We may relate to God differently during our independent years, during our interdependent years. Whether we're homeless or we're living with great wealth, we may connect with God somewhat differently. And God gives us this list of 750 to draw upon. So whichever way works best for us from the circumstances we're in and from the season of life we're experiencing and living through, we can find ways to connect with God which may be a little bit different than it was at one time. And sometimes even what we'll find is a way that worked brilliantly for us years ago is no longer a good way for us to relate now. A quick example on that. There is a verse in the Bible saying that our spirit cries out, Abba, Father. Abba is a term that means father, but it's kind of a daddy. And so it's like a 4-year-old going, Daddy, Daddy. And when we're young Christians, or when we're particularly struggling with something, that feeling of coming to God is Daddy. To sit in Daddy's lap might feel incredibly comforting. But at some later point in our life, as we're more mature in our faith, relating to God as Daddy might not really help us. In fact, that might draw us back. Like when Paul was talking to the Corinthians saying, at this point in time you should have meat, and you're still having milk. Basically what he's saying is you're still infants before God. You're spiritual, you're not learning anything, you don't get it. You should be getting into the more challenging things now, instead of the very simple, obvious, straightforward things that a child could get. You should be into the more complex, the more nuanced, the more difficult things for people to be doing. And what had happened with the Corinthians basically is, it seems in a way, they got stuck with Daddy, coming to God as immature Christians, as people not taking any responsibility, not growing up. And at some later point in time, as you read your Bible, maybe your 5th or 10th or 20th time, as you've been living as a Christian for 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, as you've been raising your children, as you've had a career, maybe you even changed careers, and you're getting into the seasons of life where you're living as a mature adult, sometimes you need to come to God as an adult child of your Father. And that relating to God as Daddy, as seeking the simplicity of the milk, may no longer resonate with you. As you come to God as a responsible adult, seeking more of a mentorship relationship rather than a Daddy, just take care of me type relationship. The way we connect with God may vary somewhat from individual to individual. The infinite God is adequate for all circumstances. The infinite God is adequate for all seasons of life. And our infinite God is adequate for all individuals. And with 750 different ways and an effectively infinite number of combinations, every individual can find the way they connect with God best. Sometimes who we are is dramatically affected by our circumstances in our life season. I mean, when you're a parent with children, that is a very different life season that dramatically affects your whole identity. especially, it seems, if you're a woman. It seems like very many women who have made dramatic changes in their life as adults did so connected to becoming a mother. Which makes sense that would happen more with women than with men, because for 9 months, women have this baby growing up inside them. The level of the reality of becoming a mother is very different than the level of reality of becoming a father. And then giving birth. Well, I don't think we need to go into much detail about why giving birth is a much more powerfully reality check on you're a mother now than the same experience is for a man. And that when you're holding this child that for 9 months you carried inside of you is a very different experience than holding this child that for 9 months your wife carried inside of her. And so as life changes, as we become different people, as our seasons of life change, as different types of reality really begin to affect us, who we are as individuals can shift. But much of who we are is also intrinsic. Who we are as a man, who we are as a woman. In the life that we lead, being a man is different than being a woman. Being a woman is different than being a man. Being of the majority race is different than being of a minority race. Being of a minority race whose behavior is similar to a majority race is different than being just of the minority race. So there's a lot of things that go on into this equation. Who we are in our personality. When we talk about the different temperaments, the powerful temperament is different than the popular or playful temperament, is different than a very precise temperament, is different than a very peaceful temperament. And each of these temperaments may come to God somewhat differently. In our values, those things that are most important to you, if your values are complementary to someone, where one person has one set of values and what's missing in the team is this other set of values, and the team forms but with these two different sets of values, you could have, say, for instance, a husband and a wife who relate to God differently. And it's not that one's right and one's wrong. One is accessing one set of the 750 while the other's accessing a different set of the 750 because their values are different. A simple example of that one occurred with my brother, where both he and his wife had a high value on career. They had a high value on being able to generate income at a high level by generating value at a high level. And both of them did this brilliantly. And then when she got pregnant with their first child, that was still her highest value. And that the plan was she was going to give birth, she was going to spend a few weeks to take care of her child, and then she was going to go back to work and turn the actual raising of her child during the workday over to trusted others who were going to come alongside and help her, grandparents in particular being some key players in that plan. But what she found is as she gave birth, there was a transformation of values to her, and she wanted to stay home and be a mother. She had a value shift. Now, if both of them had a value shift, this would be a problem because then nobody's earning money. Both of them want to stay home with the kids. But her value shift shifted to, I want to stay home with my kids. And his value shift was, I want to help support her so my kids will have a parent at home. And for him, what that meant is he needed to substantially increase his income so they could still pay the bills and not lose the house they had only recently purchased, which he did. He went and increased his income, almost doubling it in the space of 6 months, so that he could effectively replace the part of her income that was necessary to pay the bills. That was a value shift, and both of them then would relate differently to God because now she's coming as a stay-at-home mother and as a housewife, and then he's coming as the value provider to the marketplace and the financial provider for his family. And those are different values, but they work together in tandem. In fact, they can't both have the I want to stay at home with my kids value. One of them has to have I want to go into the marketplace, produce tremendous value in the marketplace to earn tremendous money to be able to have a stay-at-home parent for my kids. Our goals and aspirations will be different from individual to individual. And again, similar to what I just discussed, the goals and aspirations could be complementary. They don't have to be the same for you to be on the same team. In fact, if the goal of the quarterback and the goal of the receiver is exactly the same as to what they're going to do as an individual, that's going to be a problem. If both of them are running a pattern and both of them are trying to get the ball to throw it. But together as a team with a goal of scoring points, they work together. I do my part, you do your part. I function in the role of quarterback, you function in the role of receiver, and if we do a good job and the blockers do their job and everyone on the team does their role from their individual goals as part of the team goals, this is going to work out brilliantly. But as your goals change, as you have particular goals deriving often from your values, particular aspirations often deriving again from your values, it'll vary from person to person. And how you therefore come to God will vary from person to person. Now the Yorie matrix teaching that we do, Yorie is you, others, relationship, intimacy. So it's a step-by-step process. The matrix part has a whole bunch of aspects of people. As that changes, how you connect with God is likely to change. As that is individual, person to person, how that varies and how you will approach God from person to person is also likely to have some variation. Now the Yorie matrix explores a great many facets of who we are and what we want as individuals. For whatever anyone is, some aspects of God will resonate more, will stir more deeply in your heart, will cause each individual spirit to soar differently, each individual heart to sing differently than others. Of the 750 ways the Bible refers to God, some truth of God will stir in you more meaningfully than others. You can come to God in any of those truths of Him that you find lets you draw near to Him. Culture. As we change subcultural groups, how a particular subcultural group is likely to connect with God is likely to shift from subculture to subculture. As you change geographic regions, as you change nations, you change people groups. As history marches on, as culture changes, how we connect to God may change. As we look sometimes, even just in geographical culture, there was one particular pastor who had a challenge. He was accustomed to pastoring a church where basically the way he would get people doing things is he would teach into the circumstances so people would understand this is what it is, this is how it works, this is the big picture, this is the kind of thing that needs to be done. Find the place you can plug in and go plug in. And he found that was incredibly effective. That from his perspective, he was treating people like grown-ups and expecting them to make their own decisions. Well, then he went to a different part of the country. And he pastored in a different kind of church. And in this kind of church, he found that what had worked for him so powerfully where he came from was no longer working here. That he would lay out the exact same teaching and nobody would do anything. Nobody would volunteer for any ministry. Nobody would get involved with anything. And what he discovered with the help of a mentor is with these people, they just need to be told what to do. That when they have it left open, they're going, well, I'm not really sure what you want. Can you just tell me? And it was just a shift in culture. That in their culture, they trusted the pastor's judgment. This is okay. I understand what you're talking about. So they liked the fact he laid the foundation. He explained it. He taught into it. I understand the need you're talking about. What I don't get is how I fit in. You just need to tell me. Whereas the church he came from, he didn't need to tell them. And in fact, if he tried to tell them, they would have been offended to go, hey, wait, I am perfectly capable of figuring this out on my own. So as from one culture to another culture, a pastoring style had to shift. That they needed, in one case, a mentor God, a God that would lead them and guide them and give them some inspiration. The other one just needed basically, what's the rules? What do you want from me? Tell me what you want. And if it makes sense to me, I'll do it. The other one said, don't tell me what you want. Explain to me what's going on. Explain to me what the need is. Explain to me the kind of thing you're looking for, and I'll decide if that's where I fit in. And it was just a cultural shift from a geographic shift. Still in America, still in the same denomination, just in a different part of the country. Even just with my own life, when it comes to culture, I've seen significant cultural shifts. Even some cultural reversals, where things that were considered perfectly okay then become practically evil. Some things that people couldn't even wrap their head around not only become key issues in culture, but the opposite of what was obvious to everyone a couple of decades ago is now the new obvious in the opposite direction. And they can't even fathom why anyone would hold that old perspective that even 5 years ago was so much of a majority that very few people would admit that they would have agreed with that. And it's amazing sometimes, and scary to me, how fast culture can reverse on some of these issues. And part of what makes that so scary is if it can go from this to that quickly, that easily, that intensely, what's to stop it from going the other way again? If it can go from one way to another way and it could go back again, what else could change? And how fast could it change? And so just human ability to make changes like that, you reflect sometimes on Nazi Germany and how quickly they went from a democracy to a dictatorship. And it makes you wonder how quickly society could change. And, for my conspiracy theory friends, they talk about some of these other things as dry runs, as kind of experimenting on, whatever conspiracy they think is going on to see, can we flip this? Can we flip that? Okay, we have the people ready for a flip. We're seeing what's working, and now we're going to take this and we're going to flip that. Now, I don't know if there's a conspiracy like that out there. I'm sure there's people that would like to see some stuff like that happen. But the fact that society can flip so fast on things sometimes can be a little scary. But even when that happens, there's still ways to come to God and ways God will still connect. There might be parts of God that no longer resonate with the culture. There might be parts of God that are now being actively rejected by the culture. But at the same time that happens, there's other truths that then will resonate more. And so no matter the culture, there's some true facets of God that can reach that culture. That no matter what country you go to, and this is an important thing to remember, the issue isn't whether culture changes. The fact is, culture is different. The culture in my country now isn't the same culture we had 10 years ago. It's shifted. The culture we have now in my years now is very different than what I grew up in. It's shifted. One of the things we were just talking about is the culture of parenting has shifted. Back in my day growing up, it wasn't at all unusual on any given summer day, several of them in a row. I might get up and right after breakfast, I hop on my bike, off I go. My mom has no idea where I am. She has no idea where I'm going. She has no way to get hold of me. I might go riding off to one friend or another friend. I might head off down to the convenience store. I might go buy a comic book. I might go down to a friend's where we park our bikes and go climb up Cowles Mountain. And, at 10, 12 years old. And so long as I'm back by sunset, no one ever thought anything of it. We called that normal parenting. Now that's called free-range parenting, and sometimes I get CPS called on you. Some parents are paranoid if they lose sight of their child for even minutes because we're afraid something will have happened to their child. As opposed to the day where your child might be gone for 8, 10 hours, and you have no idea where your child is, and that was normal. That is a major shift in parenting. The curious thing about it is, statistically speaking, children are much, much safer today than they've ever been in history. And yet parents are more terrified today than they've ever been in history. That's a cultural shift. And then for the ages of man, pardon me, the march of history changes things, often globally. We often define the ages of men in very broad terms. It's the Iron Age. It's the Bronze Age. It's the industrial age, it's the post-industrial age, it's the agricultural age. And so very often the broad ages are defined by technology, or they're defined by economics. Sometimes you have things like defined by war, the age of conquest, where the way things were done is you would go someplace and you conquer the people, and now that's your territory. And that's just the way things were done. No one thought twice about it. Nowadays, that would be considered horrific. For most of human history, slavery was a normal and pervasive way of running your economy. And now slavery would be considered evil and horrific, no matter how nice you are to your slaves, because nobody should own another human being. Well, curiously enough, the way we do things now would be considered horrific to benevolent slave owners, because they would look and say, well, I have to provide room and board. I mean, the poorest slave gets a roof over their head, they get food to eat, and they get clothes to wear. You can pay your people so little money that they can't even afford to have a place to live. How is that any better? And so you can imagine kind of the challenges and the problems and the issues that some of them might have with the way we do things now. And it's a different age. It's because we have a perspective that is defined largely by a shift in the way we do things globally and global culture. So an age is basically a time in which a particular cultural perspective is common in a large part of the world. So you could almost define it as a global culture. That if some alien race were to show up and they were going to put the earth in a gazetteer somewhere to define what is the culture of this planet that we found, that would be kind of like an age-based global culture. So here's a concept. A facet truth. Every facet is a true part of a gemstone. So try to think of a gem. I was just at the San Diego County Fair yesterday, and one of the displays kind of showed how they cut diamonds and how they sort of round it off so that it's kind of in the general shape and progressively work their way down until now they're cutting individual facets. Well, every facet on that diamond is a true part of that diamond. No one's going to say, well, that facet is the real facet of the diamond, and this other facet, well, that's a false facet. Well, no, it's all facets of the diamond. Every facet of a gem is just as much a true part of the gem as any other. God is infinite, so no finite expression of Him could ever be fully complete. So we always know we're missing facets. We always know we're lacking a completeness and understanding, because you can't define the infinite in finite terms and be complete. So that's a given. But the Bible does share with us more than 750 facets of this infinitely precious gem that we call God. And into this, we consider this other part of facet truths is Genesis 1:27a. God created man in His image. This multi-dimensional approach to relating to people is not just limited to our infinite God. It's not just that God comes to us in this amazing, sometimes infinite variety of ways to connect. It's also something we can learn from as people, as Paul did. So 1 Corinthians 9:19b says, I have become all things to all men, that I might by all means save some. So Paul remembered this. Paul had an incredibly broad identity. He had a lot of facets to him that he could sink into to connect with people. He was a member of the Sanhedrin, a Pharisee of Pharisees. So if he needs to connect to high-level religious leaders, he could do that. He was one of the most powerful class of religious leaders in Israel at one time. He could also connect with people as an impoverished person. He'd lived that life too. He'd been a prisoner. He'd been free. He had the authority of the Roman citizen, and so he can connect as a citizen of Rome. But he could also connect as the alien, as the Israelite. He could connect as someone who was supported in his ministry. He could connect as someone who was self-supporting in his ministry, as a tent maker. All of these were true. He's not lying to anybody. He's not being deceptive. What he's doing is he's finding the part of the truth that most resonates with the people he's trying to reach. with the people he's building a relationship with. You have his Sermon on Mars Hill when he's talking about the unknown God. That he went into this polytheistic society, he found this altar to this unknown God, and there's a story there. And whatever the story is, they created this altar, and they declared it the altar to the unknown God. And Paul started with them there. Instead of starting there, you need to get rid of all those other gods. Get rid of Zeus, get rid of Artemis, get rid of Diana, get rid of Hera, get rid of Poseidon. You have to get rid of all these gods. No, he started with, okay, here's a God you already worship. The unknown God. I'm going to tell you about this unknown God. And he started where they were. And he connected with them where they were. He found a facet to connect with. Like, well, I can tell them about God. They have an altar here. This is my opening. This is where my facet, a truth that I know, can connect with one of their facets, a truth that they believe. They already believe in this unknown God. And I can tell them about God through the unknown God. There's a facet here where we can connect. As John Maxwell sometimes says, the 101% principle, find the 1% you agree on and give it 100% of your effort. And that's what Paul did. He found the one thing they agreed on. And he put all of his effort there. That's the door he walked through to build the relationship, to build the connection. He started where he knew he could connect. So facet truths in human relationships in general. God gives us an example. The Yoreh Trust Matrix is one approach to explore many facets of who we are as people. God in his word gives us 750 slightly different, sometimes very similar, but slightly different ways to come to him. And combinations that approach the infinite. And for all intents and purposes are infinite. How about us as individuals? Human to human as well. Because the Bible tells us if you cannot love your brother whom you have seen, how can you love God whom you have not seen? And so our human relationships is a template that we use for our divine relationship, and our divine relationship is a template we can use for our human relationship. It goes in both ways. We can learn from God in our relationship with God how to interact with our fellow people, and we can learn from our relationships with our fellow people how to relate to God. And so they both kind of can work in tandem. And so we're told that working out human relationships is a template, is an example that we must learn to love the people who we have seen, the people who we have here, in order to know whether or not we're truly loving God. And so it's an interesting template. And Jesus told us to love your neighbor as yourself. So there's another part of the template. How do you even relate to yourself? And so to love my neighbor as myself, I need to be able to have a healthy love relationship with myself, so that if I love you the way I love me, that'll be a healthy relationship. And the way I love you, the brother who I have seen, is a template to show how I can love a God whom I have not seen, who's not here as a human being for me. So facet truths in human relationships gets to be a powerful template, both for self-relationship, which isn't something we talk about a lot, but it's an interesting concept to explore. But we understand person-to-person relationship, and so you can look at your self-relationship in that. The Yoreh Trust Matrix is one approach to explore the many facets of who we are as people. And just for the single relationship, there's only one type of relationship, of romantic marriage. That romantic marriage relationship, a great many aspects of who we are, will be meaningful. We have many facet truths by which we might relate. And, this is important, some facet truths might be best left out of the relationship. I'm going to say that again. There are many facet truths we can use to relate. Many facet truths we can use to connect. Many facet truths we can use to build intimacy. And facet truths are the best kept out of the relationship. There are truths of us that are often best kept out of the relationship. Now, the people who seem to understand this best in my observation seem to be combat veterans. That they understand that sometimes the horror of war is really not something that they need to put in their marriage. If anything, they try to leave the most graphic, detailed parts of those realities out of their marriage. That they want their marriage to be a refuge from that, more than one more place they create these images in their wives' mind by sharing with them all the brutal, bloody, gory details of the horrors of war. And that they save those conversations for others who have likewise endured the horrors of war. I've encountered a great number of veterans who will almost never have detailed discussions of their war experience with civilians. And they're even careful about other veterans they will have these discussions with. When they find out that a fellow veteran has endured a similar horror, that's someone they feel they can open up to. That's someone they feel will understand. Because they understand sometimes a civilian doesn't know what it's like to shoot someone in the head for no better reason than they're wearing a different uniform. When life and death can hinge on things where you have no good choices to make, and one way or another you're going to be doing some things that would turn the stomach of the person you're in this relationship with. And that whole aspect of who you are, what you've experienced, these images and memories in your head gets left out of the relationship, and you build all your connection and intimacy in the parts that will build the relationship. In similar vein, in our relationship with God, there may be some aspects of God best left out of our individual relationship because it's most applicable to a particular age of man. It's most applicable to some different culture. It's most applicable to some different circumstances, a different type of people who have had a different kind of experience, whose reality was very different from ours. And that for us, we can't connect with God there. For us, that will disconnect us from God, even though it's true. Just like with people. So we have the bride and groom metaphor. So when we talk about romantic relationships, we talk about marriage relationships. The church, Christianity, is talked about as the bride of Christ. And so in this sense, it gives a relationship that we tend to understand, to help us understand a relationship that kind of in a vacuum without a metaphor might be very difficult to understand. So we might be able to use the metaphor to understand our relationship with God. Not all facets will be helpful to any given relationship. Sometimes some facets of truth will be hurtful to a relationship and frankly is best left out of it. That we may benefit from just leaving alone those facets that do not help us connect. Because you know, all of us have good things and bad things about us at a human level. All of us. No one of us is perfect. And you know, even when you are perfect, if the goal is relationship, some elements of perfection are best left out of the relationship. So if you read the Gospels, read Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, you can tell Jesus does not appear interested in having a relationship with the Pharisees and the Sadducees. Nor do the Pharisees and Sadducees appear to have an interest in having a relationship with Jesus. Jesus intentionally damaged his relationship with this group on purpose for good reason, using nothing but truth. But what if his goal was to build relationship? Might he come at something very differently? Well, look at how he built relationship with sinners. Instead of attacking them for their sin, instead of starting where there was the disagreement, he started where there could be connection. He started with forgiveness. He started with, he who is without sin cast the first stone. He started with, if you knew he who you were speaking to, you would ask him for living water, instead of attacking her for her lifestyle. That he began where he could connect. He might say, go forth and sin no more. but he didn't call them all sorts of bad and terrible names. Now, the Pharisees, those who were self-righteous, those who already had power, those who were so sure that they were the righteous holy ones of God, those people he didn't seem to be interested in having a relationship with. And very often there he would go right to the heart of their differences. In both cases, it's all facet truths. The truth with the sinner is a truth. The truth with the Pharisee was a truth. He didn't have to do that with the Pharisee. If his goal was connection, he would come at them very differently, as he did with the Pharisee who came to him in the night, to whom he explains, you must be born again. He goes, oh, wait a second. So not every Pharisee got the brunt of the attack. And Paul, after the resurrection, after the ascension, in a direct contact with Jesus, he got the connection in a powerful way that worked for Paul. That's how we got Paul. He was Saul of Tarsus before that, where Jesus connected rather than disconnected. And interestingly enough, from Saul to Paul, the connection was expressed as an opposition with the revelation of who he was, Paul was opposing, or Saul was opposing. But it's a connection. He used a facet of the truth in order to connect. And sometimes he would use a facet of the truth in order to create distance. So as much as it's all true, we may benefit from not only connecting where we can best connect, we may also benefit from just leaving alone those facets that do not help us connect. Now here's the part that I find a curiously staggering truth. James 4:8 kicks off with this: draw near to God, and he will draw near to you. Draw near to God. Now you can just stop there and take that as a command. Draw near to God. Do it. Just do it. You got 750 ways to draw near to God. Pick one and do it. Good. Now pick another one and do it there too. Draw near to God. But there's an extra promise in here. Draw near to God, and he will draw near to you. God opens more than 750 paths to draw near to him. God says, look, you want a relationship. Got James 4:8, draw near to me. 750 doors you can walk through. Pick the one that's easiest for you and draw near to God. And God will draw near to you. And we can choose any of those 750, singularly or in combination. And here's the part I find staggering to consider. When I draw near to God, I take man-sized steps. When God draws near to me, he takes God-sized steps. God says, look, I give you 750 ways to come to me. Just draw near to me. I will draw near to you.